What's going on, everybody? Kalipas Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be comparing the Samsung Galaxy A13 to the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022. Now, one thing I do want to point out before we go any further is that both of these phones do have 5G variants, but those are completely different phones. These phones are both 4G, so we're not getting 5G connectivity with either of them. That being said, if you do want to learn more about the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G or the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G, be sure to check out my channel because I do have several videos about those phones as well. But with that out of the way, let's get started. So with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting a 6.6-inch PLS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 83.2% screen-to-body ratio. With the Moto G Stylus 2022, we're getting a 6.8-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 396, an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, and an 84.6% screen-to-body ratio. So both of these phones do have really good displays. Both of them have 1080p resolutions, so you're going to get a nice, sharp, crisp image, which is great for content consumption. So if you're streaming videos, looking at photos, playing games, no matter what you're doing, the 1080p resolution on both phones is going to give you a real nice image. In addition to this, the colors are also really bold and vibrant, and both phones have good brightness and pretty decent viewing angles. But that being said, while both displays are really good, I do think the Moto G Stylus 2022 is better for two different reasons. The first reason being the display is larger. The difference might not be huge, but it's still definitely noticeable. And when you have a larger display, you're going to get a better experience when you're doing stuff like streaming videos, looking at photos, playing games, even reading, because everything is going to show up a lot larger. The dimensions are also better at 20.5:9 versus 20:9, so the Moto G Stylus is going to have a slightly taller and more narrow form factor, so when you're looking at things in landscape mode, you're going to get a more immersive experience, and when you're reading, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. In addition to this, the Moto G Stylus 2022 does have a 90Hz refresh rate, so the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, so when you're streaming videos, playing games, even just navigating through the phone in general, it's going to look and feel a little bit smoother and more premium. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A13, it only has a 60Hz display, and while this isn't really bad, it's not going to be quite as good. Now, I seriously doubt you can even tell the difference in this video because it is really subtle, but when you're actually using the phones, you will probably notice stuff with motion is a little bit better on the Moto G Stylus 2022. Now for storage, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Moto G Stylus 2022, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now, on one hand, with 64GB, the Samsung Galaxy A13 is really not bad. Most people will get by just fine with 64. In fact, I have quite a few apps on this phone as it is. Pretty much everything I would normally use on a daily basis. Honestly, even more because I don't really play games on my phone. And everything on this phone, including the system, is taking up only 40% of the space. So as you can see, for the average user, 64GB really isn't that bad, especially when you consider you can use microSD card expansion. So if you have a bunch of photos and videos, for example, you can always offload that stuff onto a microSD card and save even more space. But on the other hand, the Moto G Stylus 2022 with 128GB has double the storage of the Samsung Galaxy A13, and that really is a significant amount of storage. 128GB of internal storage is good even for power users, so even if you have like 50GB worth of apps or something like that, and a bunch of photos and videos on top of it, with the Moto G Stylus 2022, you're probably going to be fine. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A13, even though 64GB is perfectly fine for the average user, for power users, if you really have a bunch of stuff on your phone, you might run into problems. So if you're not doing a ton with your phone and you're not too concerned with storage, just know the Samsung Galaxy A13 really isn't bad, but if storage is a priority, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 will be a much better option. Now there's no wireless charging with either of these phones, not very surprising there, but both of them do have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys. Definitely a nice spot for a fingerprint scanner, since you're probably going to be touching this button anyway just to wake up the display, might as well unlock it at the same time. And in addition to this, both phones do have face unlock as well, so we're getting two different options to get into them. But starting with the Samsung Galaxy A13, let's go ahead and give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go. Real fast and responsive, no issues here. Moving on to the Moto G Stylus. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both of these fingerprint scanners are real fast and responsive, no issues whatsoever. And remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, the option is always there. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So definitely not a bad setup, especially considering the Samsung Galaxy A13 at the end of the day is a pretty entry level phone. For the Moto G Stylus 2022, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. Stylistically, I do think this looks a lot better. It makes the phone look much more sleek and modern, and really just adds to that more premium look that Moto G Stylus phones typically have. Now this camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, both of these phones have pretty much all the features. It's a little different with the Moto G Stylus, seeing that the ultra wide and macro camera are basically just one camera, but in terms of functionality, it really doesn't make any difference. So if you're taking lots of photos and you're looking for a wider variety of features, either of these phones will get the job done. Now in terms of quality, I do think the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a bit of a step up from the Samsung Galaxy A13. Not that the A13 takes bad photos per se, but with the Moto G Stylus, you're going to get slightly better details and better looking photos in general. So if you're just taking photos for more casual purposes and you don't really care about the quality as long as they're good enough for something like social media, then either of these phones will be perfectly fine. And again, the Samsung Galaxy A13 will get the job done. It does have a really good camera, but if you want the best quality possible between the two, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 will have an advantage. Now as far as video goes, these phones can both shoot in up to 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so nothing too impressive there, but if you're just recording casual videos for Snapchat or something like that, both phones will get the job done. With the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Samsung Exynos 850 processor. With the Moto G Stylus 2022, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G88 processor. Now I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting a single core score of 157 and a multi-core score of 588. With the Moto G Stylus 2022, we're getting a single core score of 368 and a multi-core score of 1304. So as you can see here, there's quite a difference. On one hand, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, the processing power is honestly pretty disappointing. This is not a very fast phone, and it's really only going to be good for the basics like sending text messages, making calls, maybe some light web browsing and social media use, and streaming a few videos here and there. But if you are going to be on your phone a lot, I would avoid this phone because you will notice it's not very fast. But on the other hand, with the Moto G Stylus 2022, while this is definitely not the fastest phone on the market, or even in its price range for that matter, it's quite a bit more powerful than the Samsung Galaxy A13, and you will be able to do quite a bit with this phone. Sure, it might struggle a bit if you're doing some high-end gaming, or maybe video editing or something really demanding like that, but if you're just doing more normal activities like browsing the web, going on social media, streaming videos, and pretty much more daily activities, then this phone is going to give you a much better experience than you'll get with the Samsung Galaxy A13. Now, if you're just really lightly using your phone, and you're really not planning on doing a whole lot with it, then sure, the Samsung Galaxy A13 will be perfectly fine, but I feel like for most people, with the Moto G Stylus 2022, the difference is definitely enough to be worth it. Now both of these phones have 5000 mAh batteries, so with either of these phones, you're going to get a ton of battery life throughout the day, and then down the road as the batteries degrade, which all batteries do, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly with these phones, since you're already starting out with way more battery life than you actually need. So if you like to keep one phone for a long period of time without having to replace it, either of these phones will be a good option. And in addition to the battery size, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we also get 15-watt fast charging, and with the Moto G Stylus 2022, we get 10-watt fast charging. Now, neither of these phones have the best fast charging in the world, but I will say they do both charge up really quickly, which is definitely a useful thing if you're in a hurry. Another feature I do want to point out is that the Samsung Galaxy A13 does have NFC, and the Moto G Stylus 2022 does not. So if you want to use contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay, or Samsung Pay, or Amex Pay, or really any of those tap and pay features, you can only do that with the Samsung Galaxy A13 since the Moto G Stylus 2022 doesn't have NFC. Now that's really disappointing because with the Moto G Stylus 2022, pretty much every other phone in this price range does have NFC. Now to be fair, the Moto G Stylus 5G that was just released yesterday does actually have NFC. Finally, and I will be covering that phone later next week, so definitely stay tuned if you want to see that. But between these two phones, the Samsung Galaxy A13, despite being noticeably lower end than the Moto G Stylus, is the only one of the two that actually has NFC. So despite a lot of the advantages the Moto G Stylus 2022 has, if you do want to use mobile contactless payment services, and that's a big part of how you use your phone, then the Samsung Galaxy A13 is going to have a huge advantage. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, in pretty much every way, I would say the Moto G Stylus 2022 is the better device. It has a noticeably larger display and a higher refresh rate as well, which is going to give you a better experience when you're consuming content and make the phone feel a little bit more premium to use. It has double the storage, a camera setup that can take slightly better quality photos, a much more powerful processor, and a better looking, more premium feeling design overall. But on the other hand, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, even though the processor is much weaker, the display is really not bad. The storage with 64 gigabytes and microSD card expansion is really not going to be bad for most people. It does have a good camera setup with all the features as well. And this phone does have NFC, whereas the Moto G Stylus 2022 doesn't. So in general, if you're consuming a lot of content and you're just going to be on your phone a lot and you want to take the nicest photos you can, maybe you're a power user and you need more storage, honestly in pretty much every way, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is going to be the better device here. But if you do want to use contactless mobile payment services, maybe you currently have a phone that has NFC and you're just used to the feature, then I would say the Samsung Galaxy A13, despite having a huge disadvantage in processing power, might be a better option because I know from experience, once you get used to using contactless mobile payment services, it can be kind of hard to go back. Now, it might not be a deal breaker for a lot of people, but that's definitely something to think about, and it is a pretty valid use case for the Samsung Galaxy A13. But again, in general, in pretty much every other way, while I don't think the Samsung Galaxy A13 is exactly a bad phone, the Moto G Stylus 2022 really outclasses it in pretty much every way. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A13 and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022. If you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, be sure to check out my full reviews and tips and tricks videos for them on the channel. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison, and I hope you found the information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.